This is Scott Becker with the Becker Private Equity and Business Podcast. We're thrilled today to be joined by one of our most listened to guests. We're joined today by Liz Hutson. And Liz wears a lot of different hats. She's an engineer by background. She built a career in sort of marketing, branding, then built a consulting firm focused on private equity funds and working with their medical device companies and other product companies. She's also turned herself into a professional speaker and has done an incredible job. We're going to talk about that today, today's life, where people wear multiple different hats and how they manage those lives and those careers. Liz, let me ask you to introduce yourself and then maybe take it away and talk to us a little bit about how you sort of approach life today with multiple different hats.
That sounds great, Scott. Thank you so much for having me on. Yeah, I do wear a lot of hats. You described it well. I'm an engineer turned marketer, turned consultant, turned speaker, turned fitness instructor. I wear a lot of different hats, and sometimes that can be confusing. And that's exactly the topic I want to talk about today, which I'm terming the Hyphenate Conundrum. And, you know, oftentimes, Scott, when you and I talk, I'm coming in with definitive ideas and perspectives that I want to share, maybe a path or a process that works. But today I feel like it's going to be a little different in that this is something that I'm actively figuring out, wrestling through, brainstorming through, and I'm actually really curious about your ideas on some of this because I don't know that I have a clear picture, but sort of some of the beginnings of some ideas on the matter.
No, 100%. And you know, we talk so much, like back in the day, people had these careers and they might stay with their career for 30, 40 years. And today the world is very different. It's very different both because the different gender roles have evolved so much where, you know, men switch jobs, do different things throughout their careers. They're no longer staying at one place for 30, 40 years. And then women, compared to when I started in the workplace 40 years ago, women were just fully being integrated fully into the workforce in a very different way than my parents' generation. And so many women have been able to manage these careers in their lives so beautifully while performing in different ways. And it's been instructive to men as well as to different ways of sort of creating a life that is very different than the traditional role models maybe 50 years ago. And it's left all of us doing multiple different things in multiple different ways. And I talk about this with our kids. There's these constant pivots throughout your career in trying to figure out what you're doing for the next several years, but that might not be what you're doing for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
Liz, tell us how you're thinking about some of these things.
Yeah, it's so beautifully put. There's those ideas of pivots. So I was introduced to this term hyphenate by a friend of mine, Maura Brinkman, just a couple of weeks back. And I said, what is that? What does that even mean, hyphenate? And she said, you know, she described it as somebody who performs or excels at more than one craft or an occupation. So we know a lot of people that are like that. Maybe somebody that started in one area like you described in some certain area of a career, and then all of a sudden they flipped to do something different or they're doing something at the same time. And so that might be someone who, you know, started off as like my husband, for example, is an engineer. He worked in that space. He then joined me in my consulting firm and runs the operations for our business. And then he wrote a book on Chicago architecture. I mean, those are three really completely different areas. And I think sometimes we look at that and go, wow, that's really fascinating. Going from one space to a seemingly totally different area. And you know, and excelling in those different things. And a lot like you, Scott, like you're a hyphenate for sure, right? Somebody who was in the legal space, a lawyer, partner, an entrepreneur, an author, a golfer, a tennis player. Like you do a lot, you wear a lot of different hats. That's a hyphenate.
Yes, but the constant challenge is, and we talk about this often. If I am doing too many things, I end up in the spot where we're okay at all of them versus truly excelling at any one of them. So look at the legal career versus the entrepreneurial career. And in some ways why that works so well is that I really focused for 10 years building the legal practice and building the team there. And that became 80, 90% of my time for a very long time. Well, I spent the other 10, 20% starting to seed the beginnings of the media company, but it wasn't until I was able to transition to the next spot to where I didn't have, where the time ended up being focused much more and energy and mental focus on building the media company versus building the law practice. So very much a hyphenate where you I view myself as a lawyer, entrepreneur, and father, quite frankly. But it's really, though, you can only do so many things at once well. So for a period of time, it was building the business and really being a father were the two main things. And one of the great sort of complications, and there's so much written about multitasking, is like I know myself when I'm doing tennis, golf, fitness, business investing, trying to build another business, trying to pay attention to the two businesses I'm involved in, that at some point you're less effective at everything because you're doing too much. And it's this constant balance of trying to figure out where to focus, how much to focus, how much energy you put into one thing or the other, and how to narrow down so you're hyphenated but not so hyphenated, I think is a constant evolution and challenge.
Yes, and that I think is the conundrum, right? That is it. Where, and I think what you described is important. You weren't jumping from one thing to the next every 6 months. Or you spent depth and time in the legal area and being a dad, and then shifting and spending depth and time in the media company, and then writing your book and all those kinds of things. For me, it was similar. I spent a good amount of time in each of those areas, and I built a depth. It's not to say that I abandoned those other things. I still have a lot of love and passion for them, and I still have a skill set there. But to your point, somebody that's looking on the outside in, it can be confusing. It can feel like, well, what's your segment? You feel like you're all over the place, and there's a questionability around, can you really believe it? Is there a believability in that depth? And it can feel confusing, like you said, jack of all trades, master of none, or you hear the phrase a mile wide, an inch deep, and it can be hard to overcome that. And recently, especially as I've been moving into the speaking space, I know friends and colleagues, they're watching some of the posts of me on LinkedIn. They're like, sort of nicely, but in a bit of a giggle, what are you up to these days? I'm a little confused on that. And I don't blame them, right? That's confusing when you're looking from the outside. It's chaotic.
Right. But the thing is, like, I'm one that applauds it. I think the reality is, at one time, I see knee surgeons that all they did for 30 years was knee surgery, or primary care physicians. All they saw for 30 years was patients as primary care physicians. And the ones that are burnt out, that's what they did. The ones that are enjoying themselves had straddled a couple different things. So one's in medical leadership and orthopedics. One's an entrepreneur and orthopedics. And it's exhausting and it takes energy. But I think it is a prescription against burnout to be doing just a little bit more than just one thing. And I look at it and say, like, look, if you're going to be active professionally, personally, till you're in your 70s, 80s, and that's my goal, is active into the 80s we talked about, and I still got a long time to get there, so bear with me. But the point is, you have to be constantly evolving. So when I see you evolving like you're evolving, I think it's, one good thing is you and your family have the luxury to evolve like that. That you're economically have the wherewithal to be able to evolve. And as long as you do so, this taking on new challenges, like one of my favorite people in the world is constantly trying to become a public speaker or trying to do other things as well. Teaches, has a career, and tries to do other things too. And I just applaud that constant effort to try and get better and to improve. And I'm just a huge fan. So I don't look at it. I remember anytime I've started a new thing, you're always going to have naysayers, like friends that sort of giggle. What is she doing? Why is she competing in public speaking? And I view it the opposite. I view it as fantastic and a way to keep thriving and growing. And you might not do it for the next 20 years. In 5 years, you might be working on the next thing. But you know what? It's okay. It's okay, is my perspective. And I think it's fantastic. And I love, I have a friend who does that, that's constantly evolving and trying to do different things and goes deep into certain things, not as deep into other things. And I just happen to be the hugest fan of it, quite frankly.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate that encouragement. I feel like I'm getting some good therapy in here. I appreciate that. But I do think as I look back on all these and these different areas and the constant evolution, I think you're right. I mean, this is how we keep ourselves interested, engaged, constantly learning. And as I reflect on different things that you've been up to and different things that I'm up to, I do find that if there is, and there is, I believe, a single thing, a single tie that brings it all together, what's like the through line that's coming through this? Because then it feels like there's a little bit of clarity in the chaos. It sort of brings sense to that lack of, what seems like lack of focus, or it centers, all the different tentacles that appear to be disparate. And like for you, Scott, as I've gotten to know you in the last few years, one thing that comes to mind, and you tell me if this is true or not, but I find you to be, in all those different areas that you've worked on, somebody who really amplifies ideas, somebody who really empowers the voices of others, and particularly ones that might not otherwise have been heard.
We try to, but we also by nature enjoy it. And then also, you have to remember that there are certain people that we work with. You're one of them. Amber Walsh is another one that literally shows up to every podcast as just a complete professional with organized thoughts about what they're going to talk about. And so what happens is this makes what I do in working with those people just fantastic. So I enjoy it tremendously. And it's like so many things in life. There's so many different things where there's a Venn diagram and there's a fit, and you just enjoy it working with the people, and you fit in that category. Amber fits in that category. Many other people do as well, but you and Amber stand out as always coming with something thoughtful to speak about, not just going back and forth. And I do that with a lot of people, and many of them do it fantastically well. So it's not a knock on them, but I particularly enjoy the people that make the effort to really think about, here's what I'd like to talk about.
Thank you. I mean, to be put in the category with Amber Walsh is a big compliment to me. So thank you for that. I appreciate that.
No, it's fantastic. Liz, it is great to visit with you. This discussion, the constantly evolving and refocusing, I think is an ongoing discussion. We'd love to pick it up with you again in a couple weeks. It just is, it's a subject we're all working on.
Sounds like a great plan, Scott.
You know where your business would be without you. Imagine where it could go with more of you. Well, with Wix, you can create a website with more of your vision, your voice, your expertise. Wix gives you the freedom to truly own your brand and do it on your own, with full customization and advanced AI tools that help turn your ideas into reality. Scale up without being held back by cookie-cutter solutions, and grow your business into your online brand. Because without you, your business is just business as usual. Take control. Go to Wix.com.